Welcome back to AP World History. We're going to be looking at Chapter 15, and we're going to look at a fundamental change that takes place in the world, and that is a shift of power from the east to the west. Now, we've been looking at the Mongol Empire, we've looked at the Chinese Empire under the Tang and the Song dynasty, we've looked at India, the Gupta dynasty. We've looked at the Muslims and how they controlled the Middle East and Northern Africa and influenced Central Africa. But there's going to be a change, and that is that these powers are going to decline and Western Europe is going to rise in prominence. We're going to look at the reasons for that and how this changes the geopolitical map. So the old order is going to deteriorate. The rise of the West or European powers, Western expansion, and tying the world together in a global trading network. In 1200 CE, Middle East was dominated by the Byzantine Empire, the Seljuk Empire, and Khwarezm Empire. Now, Seljuk Empire and Khwarezm were both Muslim empires. Byzantine was considered a Christian empire. And then you have the decline of the Song dynasty in 1200 CE, and eventually they will be taken over by the Mongols. The Seljuk and the Khwarezm empires, both Muslims, but they're going to be destroyed by the Mongols at the end of the 13th century. The Byzantine Empire, which stood for a number of years, is for about 1,000 years, is going to fall to the Ottomans, Turks, in 1453, which is an important date because there's going to be a shift of power in the Middle East and Mediterranean. Here shows the Seljuk and the Khwarezm empires, and you can see the green being the Muslim empire. But those empires are going to be destroyed, be taken over by the Mongols. The fall of the Constantinople is in 1453, and this will end the Christian dominance of this particular location. Muslims will then control Constantinople. Mehmet II is the fellow responsible for conquering the Byzantine Empire. So Europeans versus Turks. This is going to go on for a number of years, centuries. There are a couple of times that East meets West, and the West is able to turn back the Ottoman Turks. Suleiman the Great was turned back at Malta. A couple of other important battles in Vienna. And the West is going to be able to hold back the Muslim onslaught. Now, the social and cultural changes in the Middle East, secular themes were replaced by religious themes. According to Islamic scholars, you couldn't find anything really of any noteworthy importance in human reasoning. They're going to be very protective of the Muslim faith, not allowing outside philosophies, ideas to permeate their society. In terms of the peasants in the Middle East, they seem to be losing power, their freedoms. They become like serfs that we have in Europe under the feudal system. Taxes decline because people essentially gave up because they were being taxed so heavily and driven by the Muslim ruling elites. The collapse of the Muslim Caliphate was gradual and incomplete. The Caliphate being the ruling body. Um, but this did not prevent the Seljuks or Khorasan from continuing to trade. They will continue to trade even under the Muslim or the Mongols. And when the Turks take over Constantinople, they will pretty much have a stranglehold on trade coming out of the east. They never do establish the trading empire that the Byzantines had created, and essentially the Europeans who had enjoyed products from the east, it's going to be down to a trickle. And this is going to, once you've had a taste of the good life and good things, spices, silks, things coming out of the east, Europeans coveted those things and they wanted more of them. But they were blocked by the Muslims, by the Ottoman Empire. Under the Mongols, we know that the Silk Road did flourish, but as the Mongols lose their grip on this area, the Silk Road will be a dubious adventure at best. Many of the caravans fall prey to bandits. This shows the extent of the Mongol Empire. And when they were in control, the trading routes, the Silk Road from China was open. The Mongols promoted exchange of ideas and technology. Gunpowder is going to be transferred to the west, which is going to give them an edge later on. So these ideas are going to benefit Europe. With the fall of the Mongol Empire, well, again, we talk about the Silk Road being disrupted. And here shows a picture of the Silk Road ending up into the Middle East. With the Mongol overlords, when they were driven from China and the Ming Dynasty takes control, briefly they got interested in international trade. They had a huge fleet. They sailed to India, and they also sailed to the Middle East and to the east coast of Africa. Eventually, they decide that that's not what they want to do, and they pull back from being a global trader. They concentrate mostly in the Middle East or in the Southeast Asia area. This shows the Ming Dynasty and the land that they controlled, and they will have an influence on the folks in the Asia. This Chinese fleet will reach the coast of East Africa and establish some trading posts, but that will be short-lived. This particular fleet that sailed from 1403 CE to 1433 were commanded by a admiral named Cheng Ha, a eunuch, and he rose to prominence, and he was in control of the fleet. This shows a picture of Admiral Cheng Ha. China's, we could say it in some words, China's Columbus, because he did extensive travel in the Indian Ocean and down to Southeast Asia, the Middle East. This shows this picture of him and the size of the ships. This was a treasure ship. Each ship was about 400 feet long and about 160 feet wide. Pretty impressive ships. And they will become a global trader. And history might have been quite different if they had continued, but they will pull back. Later Chinese emperors under the Ming Dynasty felt that these expeditions were far too expensive, and so they will decide not to do that. They sort of become isolated in terms of ideas from the West, which will be eventually their downfall. They will continue to trade with the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. But this shows some of the places that this Ming fleet sailed to, and you can see Calcutta and Mogadishu and so forth. Um, and when you look at this for the time, this is a pretty impressive feat that they accomplished. Now, the conditions in Europe during this time, you know, when we look back in the Dark Ages, we know that it's a period of stagnation, feudalism, uh, the ruling class were really the only ones who could afford an education. It was based on allegiance, um, vassals swearing their allegiance to the king, and the vassals having knights swear their allegiance to them. And so the monarchies depended on the aristocrats to really enforce the rules, and it was pretty much fragmented in Europe. There wasn't real strong central governments. Um, People died during the Black Death. We've talked about that before. The food supply was insufficient. Um, so the Black Death is going to take millions, and this is going to put a tremendous crimp in the Western advancement. Um, Eventually, there's going to be a revival of sorts, and this will become in the form of the Renaissance, and this will be centered in uh, the Mediterranean area in Italy. Monarchs will become more centralized. They won't depend on their power from vassals and knights. They will hire their own army. So the soldiers have their allegiance to the king only. So feudalism will come to an end, and you have stronger kingdoms developing, which is going to spur, they're going to finance some of these expeditions to find new ways to India and China. The Spanish Peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula, eventually will push the Muslims back to North Africa. This was called the Reconquista, reconquest, and eventually Granada is going to be the last holdout on the Iberian Peninsula, and this will be in 1492. Isabella and Ferdinand will join forces. They will marry. They will drive the Muslims out. And it seems almost immediately they will finance a trip by Columbus to the New World. And we'll stop right here and pick up chapter 15 next time when we look at part 2.